Ontario was the last province to sign on to the federal $10 a day childcare program. It's an affordability measure intended to help parents of young kids. That usually makes it fodder for the campaign trail, too. With us to find out whether that's the case and what voters have to choose amongst the party's platforms, we welcome, in the nation's capital, Athena Basiliadis, childcare worker at Glebe Parents Daycare in Ottawa and executive member of CUPE Local 2204. In Hamilton, Ontario, Adrian Davidson, assistant professor of political science at McMaster University. And here in the provincial capital, Carolyn Ferns, public policy and government relations coordinator at the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare. And we're delighted to welcome you three onto our program tonight. Without further ado, just sit back and be comfortable for a moment, because we want to go through what all four major parties have on offer as it relates to childcare in this campaign. And I'll ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to bring these graphics up. The PC party is offering, as mentioned, that deal with the feds, lower childcare to $10 a day by September 2025, creating 86,000 new spaces. That includes 15,000 spots already added since 2019, and set a wage floor for all childcare workers of $18 an hour, with annual increases up to $25 an hour. What about the NDP? Well, they would explore ways to get to a $10 a day childcare agreement faster by working with the feds, immediately increase the standard wage to $25 an hour for registered early childhood educators and $20 an hour for all other program staff, create a province-wide strategy to guarantee expansion of public and nonprofit childcare. The Liberal parties next, they would maintain the $10 a day daycare, but make the discounts retroactive to January 1st, 2022 to make up for the months of negotiations. Ontario, of course, the last province to sign on. They'd create 30,000 new jobs for early childhood educators and bring compensation into line with full-day kindergarten, and provide tuition, free tuition for all early childhood education programs at Ontario colleges. And finally, the Greens, they also say they'd work with the feds to ensure continued funding for $10 a day childcare and provide early childhood educators with a wage of at least $25 an hour. Okay, that's what they've got on offer. Let's go through this now and see what you like and what you don't. Carolyn, get us started here. What jumps out at you as being, yeah, I like that?
Sure. I guess the first thing that I really like is that we're in a situation here in the Ontario election where we have every party committed to $10 a day childcare. And that just shows what a game changer the federal childcare plan is. You know, if you'd asked me 4 years ago if we would have, every party in this election committed to $10 a day childcare, I wouldn't have believed it. But here we are. So I think that that's really good news. It means that we've really moved the needle on childcare, and that's a victory for advocates that have worked on this for the last 50 years.
Okay. Athena, how about you? What jumps out at you to the point where you can say, I like that?
Well, I have to agree with what Carolyn said. It's been a long time coming for us to see all parties talking about childcare as an election issue. What jumps out at me is the immediate increase with respect to the wages for childcare workers who have really been supporting childcare on the backs of their incomes for a very long time. So I think increasing the wage immediately is something that jumps out at me, as well as a number of other things that I'm sure we're going to talk about today. But that's one thing, and the parties need to work together in order to get this done.
Okay.
Workforce.
Gotcha. Adrian, how about you?
I mean, I think the thing that jumps out to me is, like sort of Carolyn said, we don't see a lot of difference between these parties on the commitment to childcare. And that's a great start, because so often in elections, it's been a case of, do we invest or do we not? And so all parties have come together and say, we are investing in childcare. The other thing that jumped out to me is this piece around workforce development, particularly the Liberal plan to reduce or eliminate tuition for ECE students, because so much work has to be done in order to create a well-educated care economy for our children.
Let me do a follow-up with you on that. Do you think that if that policy were to be implemented, that in fact more people would go into wanting to be early childhood educators who might not otherwise choose that path because they could get a free education in it?
I think that's part of the picture, and you see within the Liberal Party plan as well as in the NDP, it's not the only part of the picture. In order to make childcare a good place to work, we have to be making sure that we're paying care providers appropriately, that they can opt in to benefits or create sort of mechanisms to have benefits and potentially pensions. There's more that has to be done in order to make care work a place where people can build a career. And so that's part of the picture. The other part is obviously wage enhancements and benefits enhancements.
To that end, Athena, is there anything in any of the, as you look at all the programs, is there one that stands out above the others in terms of the issues that matter to you?
Well, I think that the ensuring that we're growing the system in the not-for-profit sector is a really important piece, which really relates to quality. So I think that, you know, the NDP plan, working with the federal government, increasing wages immediately, ensuring that we grow the system in a not-for-profit way, I think is something that really appeals to the workforce and to myself and those who advocates as well.
All right, let's now take, I mean, you've all told us what you really like about the plan. I'd like to find out now what you think is missing. Now, we obviously didn't put an exhaustive list of bullet points there for what's in all the plans, but you all have a good sense of it. Is there anything in the childcare plans, Carolyn, to you first, that you say, that should be in there and it's not?
Well, I mean, a good thing is that we see, you know, as Adrienne said, each of the parties is starting to grapple with the issue of the workforce. But I'd contend that, you know, for the most part, in the main, they don't go far enough, because right now we have a workforce crisis in childcare, right? We can't recruit and retain enough early childhood educators. For the spaces that we have now, I know that there are programs across the province that are limiting their capacity, closing rooms because they don't have the staff. And if we want to expand childcare to serve many more families, we really have to grapple with the workforce crisis. So I think that commitments to decent work and pay, on that, the Conservative plan is nowhere near enough. You know, a wage floor of $18 an hour, even they admit, would only help about a quarter of folks in the sector. So we need to do much better than that. You know, the Liberals have a plan to raise wages, which is good. The NDP say immediately raising the wages to $25 an hour, which I think is a very good start. And they also commit to consulting the sector on a proper workforce strategy, which is what we really need.
And if you had your druthers and the plans were more akin to what you have in mind, what should be in there, as opposed to the wage enhancements, I get that, but what else should be in there to get you to the promised land?
Yeah, sure. So on wages first, you know, the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare and the Association of ECEs have called for $25 for all childcare workers and $30 for registered early childhood educators, understanding that that's a regulated profession in Ontario. These are people with degrees and diplomas working in early childhood education. But we also need to have decent work standards. So, you know, paid sick days, professional development, and paid time for programming, right, which is so important. What we've seen in the pandemic is early childhood educators just burning out from, you know, from the level of stress and hard work that they've put in over the last few years. So we really need to reverse that. And we can't recruit our way out of it, right? We know that actually we have lots of graduates from early childhood programs, but they only stay in licensed childcare for about 3 years. And we need to change that to turn working in licensed childcare into a career for folks.
Okay, Adrienne Davidson, what didn't you see in any of those plans that you think ought to be there?
Well, I think, so, as I sort of said earlier, it's interesting to me that we see so much similarity between these plans. And the biggest place I see similarity is the agreement around 86,000 spaces. You know, none of these parties have said we are going to do more sooner than this, because, you know, this is provincial jurisdiction. This is the provincial playground. The federal government has, you know, that agreement sets the floor of 86,000 spaces, or really 71,000 spaces, because we're already accounting for 15K. There's a lot more that the province could be doing. They could be putting up their own money. They could be thinking creatively about bringing unlicensed providers into the sector, pulling on the existing, you know, workforce that's left early childhood education, and thinking creatively about how do we bring these people back in to do more spaces sooner. And so the fact that I haven't seen any innovation from any of the provinces there or any of the parties there, I think is actually quite surprising.
Athena, how about you?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Adrian just said. If we really get to the $10 a day where the affordability is there for families, we're going to need a lot more spaces. I've heard numbers in the ballpark of 200,000 is what we're going to need. And I think that this, previously in past platforms and elections, they talk about choice. And you don't have a choice if you can't afford the actual care. And I think that that's something that we really need to hammer home is that you don't have, if you can't afford it, it's not accessible to you. It is not an option for you. So I would like to see more spaces being made available, but the only way we're going to get there is with the workforce strategy. And we really need to talk about this more.
Well, speaking of talking about this more, Athena, I'd like to get a better sense of what the last couple of years have been like for you and your colleagues who work at the Childcare Centre in Ottawa. Let's start with this. Did you have to close down at some point during the pandemic?
Well, we did close initially during the pandemic, and I think that programs had to close as a result of illness and not having staffing capacity to continue. So we did have some closures throughout the pandemic. But what we've seen is staff's inability to have any kind of time off. A lot of issues around sick leave, holiday leave. There's supreme burnout going on in the field. It's staggering. We talk about being forgotten on the front lines, and that's exactly what has happened. We were deemed essential workers, yet we weren't given pandemic pay. We weren't given any access to the things we needed at the onset to safely open our doors. And I'm talking about basic PPE, rapid testing, PCR testing, vaccination priority for staff, compensation in the form of pandemic pay, additional sick leave days. All of these things were extremely disheartening to the childcare workforce, and they've had a really, really staggering impact on the workforce. So you're seeing a lot of workplace stress, a lot of decrease in mental well-being and job satisfaction. You're seeing burnout in an unprecedented way, and a lot of people leaving the field through the pandemic and not returning. So when we talk about quality care is really dependent on continuity of care. And when you don't have that in the sector, we are not providing quality care. So this is a concern that we have too moving forward, is that unless we get a stable workforce, quality is going to decline within the sector. And that is something that my colleagues are really concerned about. The passion and the pride that people have for their work has decreased as a result of the stress-related issues that we're experiencing.
Well, that's not good, obviously. Now, one more follow-up to you, Athena, if I can. I've heard
Sure.
anecdotally that people have been so burned out that they have left the field entirely. But I want to know, do you know people for whom that is the case? Do you have colleagues who have quit and not come back?
Absolutely. I work in a community-based center in Ottawa, and we have seen 5 or 6 staff leave the field, take stress leaves, and who are thinking about not returning to the field. And these are passionate, dedicated childcare workers who've affected the lives of so many people, and they don't want to do this anymore. It's really not worth it.
Carolyn, that's one example at one childcare operator in one city. What about province-wide? Is that the same case?
Yeah. Absolutely. And, Athena said forgotten on the front line. And that's what we made the title of our report on the workforce. We did a survey back last spring asking early child educators how they were faring through the pandemic. And the responses that I saw, that we heard back, were so startling that I knew that we were, going to be facing a real crisis. And so we were ringing the alarm bell on that. And then, we started to see in the fall that childcare programs were closing rooms, some closing entire centers, not because they didn't have wait lists of families that wanted a space, but because they couldn't staff their programs, right? Because so many people were leaving. And of course, this is a concern. We talk about recruitment and retention, workforce crisis. But what does that mean for the child, right? And I can say as a parent, when my son started in childcare as an infant, I didn't used to say to him, we're going to childcare or we're going to school. I said, we're going to see Julia, because Julia was the ECE that he had bonded with. But if Julia isn't there on Monday because she's burned out or gone to another job, what does that mean for the experience of the young child? So as we're at this place where we're going to be building a new kind of system and wanting to open up many more spaces to more families, We have to keep the experience of young children at the heart of this. And that's, I think, the primary reason that we need to solve the workforce crisis in childcare.
Okay. Adrian, let me put a new issue on the table and put that to you. The childcare deal that the province of Ontario and the federal government have struck applies, as I understand it, only to licensed providers. And of course, and I understand why everybody in the sector is partial to licensed providers. There are, of course, plenty of unlicensed providers. And I want to know what you think all of this portends for parents who can only get access to unlicensed providers who may be, whatever, closer to home, in the neighborhood, just a better circumstance for their kids, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, immediately it creates access issues and it creates equity issues. We know from research that a lot of the parents who use unlicensed providers are those who can't find anything else because they live in a childcare desert. It's not easily accessible or available. And they won't have access unless their provider becomes licensed. They will not necessarily have access to $10 a day childcare, and they certainly won't have access immediately once this plan goes into place. So we need to think a little bit more creatively, I think, about how we create pathways to licensing, make licensing attractive for independent providers who are currently unlicensed, and give opportunities for those families to participate and benefit from the $10 a day program.
Carolyn, what might that look like, that sort of easier pathway to licensing, which I guess all of you support?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that, this is part of the expansion question that we need to grapple with, right? What's the expansion strategy for childcare? And I've certainly heard from families, just as Adrian described, who've said, I'm with an unlicensed childcare provider. What do I do? They'd like to become licensed. How does that happen? And I say, oh, well, contact a childcare agency. But if there's only one agency in their town or maybe nothing in their area, how does that happen, right? So I think that one of the things that we need to do, that the next provincial government needs to do, is really think about what is this expansion strategy, center-based and family home childcare, expanding home childcare agencies and making sure that they're good quality. As Adrian said, breaking down those barriers so that unlicensed providers, who qualify can become licensed. So I think that that's really what we need to do. I think we need to be expanding in all areas of childcare for families.
Okay, I want to talk some hardball politics with you three because I can't recall an election ever that I've covered where childcare didn't come up as an issue, except this one. Childcare has, have we heard, has any of it reached the public's attention during this campaign? It's been the quietest I can ever recall childcare being discussed during an election campaign. And I wonder whether that's because, and Athena, why don't you start with this one? Did the deal between the feds and the province basically remove childcare as a political/election issue because everybody thinks this is solved now?
Yeah, well, I think that is the case. I think that Ford's holdout, made our victory a little less sweet. And I think that was the intent, to hold out, to sign the agreement, and then move on and not have it be a topic of discussion, because really there's no plan in place for how we're going to get there. So I do think that was the strategy there. Check it off the list and move on and not have it be a topic of discussion. It absolutely should be an election issue. The pandemic in the past 2 years have really served to magnify the importance of childcare and the need to build this Canada-wide system, but we really don't have any of the specifics, and we need to be talking about it. And I really do hope that when people are going to the polls that even if they don't need childcare themselves, they know that their colleagues do in order to get to work. And it is a vital and critical service that we need to expand in a really mindful and thoughtful way.
Adrian, what do you think? Why has this not been a bigger election issue?
Yeah, I think it's very surprising that we've heard more about, expanding or making available an optional grade 13 than we have about the biggest investment in early years learning ever. And that's not to, put aside the disruptions that students have experienced over the last 2 years, but we know from, an educational equality perspective, grade 13 only does so much. Where we see the huge investments in learning, where we see equality of opportunity gains, is when we invest in early years. And so it's really surprising to me that we haven't seen this politicized more, particularly because, parents are still holding the bag on having to pay childcare fees. Most parents I know haven't seen any of the money in terms of retroactive payments that were supposed to come before the election. We saw the provincial government drag its heels on negotiating, and that's had real sort of affordability concerns for parents even to today. So it is surprising to me that it hasn't come up more, given sort of both the fact that we have a lot to do on this file moving forward, as well as the uncertainty that parents are still experiencing.
In fact, Carolyn, Stephen Del Duca did an event in Oakville this morning at which he explicitly pointed out that the Liberals would make those payments retroactive back to January. We mentioned that earlier in this discussion. And that, to the best of his knowledge, no parents had received those retroactive payments which the current government promised to do. So why hasn't childcare been a bigger issue in this campaign?
Yeah. Well, I think that, Athena, when you said that, the government signed just at the deadline, and that kind of, made it a non-issue. That's exactly what we heard from all of the other parties, when we reached out to them. Childcare is going to be there in our platform, but because there's not such a big contrast between us and each of the other parties, it's not going to be a huge issue for us. But I think that, even if it's not being discussed, it's certainly a big issue for parents. And that, as you said, Steve, the fact that no parents have actually received, lower fees at this point, I think that is an issue because, of course, Doug Ford, when he signed that agreement at the end of March, he promised parents that they'd start to see lower childcare fees in May. And that hasn't happened, right?
And May's over.
I think it was an irresponsible promise to make. It was a promise made and a promise broken. So I think that should stick to them. The other thing I'd say really needs to stick to the Conservative Party is, if we look back over the past 4 years, sure, they signed that agreement in March, but they were dragged to the negotiating table kicking and screaming. It was months. We were the last province to sign on. And their record over the last 4 years on childcare has been, pretty lacking in ambition.
Well, let the record show we have not ignored childcare on this program, and which is why we wanted to have the three of you on to discuss it. And Carolyn, if you can do it in 10 seconds, because you have the province-wide view on this thing, what letter grade do you want to give the PC government for the last 4 years on childcare?
Well, I guess they would get, an incomplete on that last semester because they signed the agreement, but only, just on the deadline. But if I'm looking over the past 4 years, it's a failing grade. I mean, this is a provincial government that canceled a provincial plan for free preschool for young kids, that tried to cut $80 million from childcare, that watered down regulations, over and over again. I think they really did let families in the sector down on childcare. As Athena said, they ignored childcare through the pandemic and childcare workers through the pandemic in so many ways. So they definitely get a failing grade, I think, and maybe just squeaked through in that last semester by signing the agreement.
Adrian, I didn't ask you because I figure as a professor, you grade enough papers as it is and you don't want to do anymore. Adrian Davidson from McMaster University, Carolyn Ferns from the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare, Athena Basiliadis, childcare worker at the Glebe Parents Daycare in Ottawa. It's good of all three of you to join us on TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for having us.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.